Hi everybody. Here we are working on building block number 3, yarn over and bobbles. Before I turned the camera on, I went ahead and started with my cast on of 48 stitches. I then worked the seed stitch border for a total of 6 rows. I then worked the setup row one time only. The setup row is like your substitute row 1 the first time through the pattern. So I worked my setup row once. I then moved on to row number 2, 3, 4, and 5 so that I now have my border followed by 5 rows of stockinette stitch. So you can see the knit stitches on the right side and the purl stitches on the wrong side. In row 6, we switch from working purls on the wrong side rows, even numbered rows, to suddenly knitting on the wrong side of your work. This is to create this first ridge that you see on the right side of the work in the pattern block. So I'm going to go ahead and, I've got my row counter over here. You can see that I'm getting ready to work row 6. And I'm just going to go ahead and work my 4 border stitches. Hold on, that's a purl stitch. And we're going to knit across this row. Now I will show you on the other side. It will sort of look almost like a mistake row. Because you're going to have those purl bumps on your right side and a knit row on the wrong side. You can see that there, how the texture becomes different. You've got the V's on the back side. And I'll just kind of show you how we might go about. This won't be an actual mistake. This is truly what we want to be doing. But I thought I'd show that if you did have a mistake in this block or another one, how you might go ahead and go about correcting that. Just hurry and finish this part up here. My hands aren't quite as sure trying to peer around my camera as I work. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take this up here. All right. So now when I turn it to this side, you can see that there is, there are the purl bumps now on this side, which is what we want. But let's say, for instance, that you realized you had accidentally purled across a right side row, or you had knit across a wrong side row, as if you know, maybe you lost track of your pattern, you're watching a show while you're knitting and you realize, oh no, now I've made this mistake. There are a couple of things you can do. You could carefully tink back across your work. Tink is just knitting backwards. So you could actually insert your needle into the row below, the one that's sitting on your needle, and just pull stitches off. Again, I'm going to insert into the row below and pull my working yarn out. Insert my needle below and pull that stitch out. And you could go across the whole row just like that until you got back to where you needed to be, and then you go ahead and work the row correctly. You could also just pull your knitting off the needle and go ahead and rip it all out. I would place a lifeline first if you decide to do that, just to make sure no stitches ladder down beyond where you want them to be. But that's certainly an option. If you feel comfortable with picking stitches back up, live stitches, then you wouldn't necessarily have to insert a lifeline, but you would have to be careful that all of your stitches were back up to the same row where they should be before putting them back on your needle. Another way of going about fixing a mistake is to work to the area where your mistake is. So obviously in this case, our border would be just fine. Work the seed stitches as normal. But say you suddenly come to this column of stitches where now you have a purl bump at the top, but the rest of it is stockinette. What you can do is go ahead, pull the stitch off of your needle, pull that working yarn out. It was coming up from the front of your work because it was a purl stitch. But in order to make it a knit stitch, you take that yarn, put it to the back of your work, insert your needle tip through that stitch, grab the yarn, and act as if you're knitting that stitch, pull it up and through. Now it's a knit stitch instead of a purl stitch. When I did that, you can see that now my stitch is facing backward. It is facing toward my right side instead of the left side as it should be. All I would then do is turn it around so that it's facing the right way. If I were to knit that facing this way, it would be really difficult, first of all, to get my needle in there. And if I did it, it would twist the stitch. You can see that there. And then the texture would just, you know, it wouldn't look right. So, but say I accidentally had a twisted stitch like this one. Again, pull your needle tip out, pull the working yarn out, bring it back up, turn it around so it's facing the correct way, and then you could go ahead and work as normal. Now obviously for this, I want that to be a purl stitch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull that yarn out. And actually all of this would probably have been easier to see against the black background, huh? So I pulled that yarn out, I bring it to the front of my work, grab my stitch on my needle and just sort of ease that yarn in through the front, and you can see that my purl stitch is back. Again, it's facing backward, so I'm just going to put it right back on my right hand needle facing the correct way. Hopefully that's relatively clear on how I did that. I'll go over it again one more time here. So if I wanted to make this purl stitch into a knit stitch, I would pull it off, pull the yarn out, bring it around the back, grab the stitch, and pull the yarn in from the back, knit stitch. Put it facing the correct way and ready to go. If on the other hand I want to reverse the stitch the other way, bring that out, bring it to the front of my work, pull it in through the front, and voila, purl stitch. Now, say I was working along and oops, I slipped a stitch, and now I know it's not quite right. It's a row below the others, and when I turn and look at the wrong side of my work, I just have this loose yarn hanging out here. I would again grab that stitch, grab that loose yarn that is just the working yarn from the previous row, and pull it up and through. Or in this case, I wanted a purl stitch, so pull it in through the front. Okay. I know someone else had also said, oh, I need to correct a knit two together that got messed up, or say you're on your following row and you say to yourself, oh no, that should have been a knit two together on the previous row. What I would do is go ahead and take those 2 stitches off the needle. I'd pull the working yarn out of them, bring them back up, make sure they're oriented correctly, facing toward the left on my needle. I'd insert my right hand needle through those 2 stitches, and this time I'd bring that loop of yarn that's on the back of my work, the working yarn from the previous row, and I'd pull it through both stitches to create a knit 2 together. If I knit 2 together when I shouldn't have, I would also pull the yarn out of those 2 stitches that were knitted together, put them back on my left hand needle, making sure they're facing the correct way, grab that loop of yarn from the back, pull it up and through. Now again, we want these to be purl stitches, so I'm going to bring it up to the front, pull it in through the front, put it back on my needle facing the correct way. And now we're ready to actually go on with row number 7 of our block. That was just sort of a little aside on fixing mistakes. Hopefully that's not too irritating to those of you who are like, let's just get on with block number 3, but it's just kind of, I know there had been questions about how to fix mistakes. Hopefully that's helpful, particularly pertaining to blocks both number 3 and 4, but fixing mistakes in general as well. All right, so starting row number 7, we've got our 4 stitches, and then we're ready to go with the row, which says knit 2 together, yarn over, and repeat all the way to the end. So I'm going to knit these 2 stitches together, insert my needle through both stitches, wrap, pull the yarn through them both. Now I'm going to bring my working yarn to the front, insert my needle through the next 2 stitches. The working yarn at the front of my work creates the yarn over as I wrap to pull through those 2 stitches. And then I'm going to do that going all the way to those last 4 stitches of my row, which will be my seed stitch border. So you can see here the yarn overs kind of slant hard, and then you've got your knit 2 togethers. Bring the yarn to the front of my work, knit 2 together, yarn to the front, knit 2 together, yarn to the front, knit 2 together, and just continue that all the way across. Making sure that my yarn indeed gets pulled through both stitches. Although everyone should probably be pretty familiar with this, having worked the number 4 block. We're just doing it even more across the whole row in this block. Now, because the knit 2 together is the first thing you do, every knit 2 together is followed by a yarn over, including the very last one. So here I am, you can see my 4 border stitches. I'm doing my last knit 2 together, and I'm still going to bring my yarn up to the front of my work to create that last yarn over before I work my border stitches. If you do not do this final yarn over, you will be 1 stitch short in the following row. And every time you work a row 7, if you do not do that last yarn over, you're going to reduce your block by 1 stitch and 1 more stitch, and so on and so forth, until you have a block that tapers up toward the top. So you want to make sure you do that final yarn over before the 4 border stitches. Very important, or when you go back and count your stitches, you will see that you no longer have 40 stitches in the body of your block. Then we are going to work the 4 border stitches on the wrong side row and knit across. You can see as I come to this first yarn over, it's a pretty big loose loop. I'm going to knit into it, and that's going to create that row of eyelet holes that you can see on the picture in the book. And you should always have 1 yarn over stitch to knit into, followed by 1 more normal looking stitch to knit into. And we're going to alternate that going all the way across. Okay, when I turn on the next time, we will be working a row number 1. So I'm going to continue on through row number 12, and when I get back to row 1, I'll demonstrate how we work that bobble. Okay, so here I am, having worked my first repeat of rows 1 through 12. Of course, our first row 1 was actually the setup row, so there are no bobbles in the first part, which is exactly what we want as shown in the picture of the finished block. So I've worked the setup row, then rows 2 through 12, giving me the first repeat, which, as you can see, is a section of stockinette, the eyelet row, and then a little more stockinette. With our first row 1, we are going to go ahead and work the row where we make bobbles. We're going to work rows 1 through 12 a total of 5 times. So I've already worked it once. I'm going to work it 4 more times. That'll give 4 bobble making rows. So you can see here, repeat 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 carries us up to the seed stitch border. So a total of 5 times, already gone through it 1 time, about to work the first row 1 in the pattern repeats, the body of the pattern. You can see here I'm on row 12. And I'm going to go back to row 1. All right. So for row 1, we are once again going to work the 4 seed stitch border stitches. And our first instruction is to knit 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come on, I keep splitting my yarn here. There's 5 and 6. All right. Now we are going to make a bobble, which means that into this next stitch, from 1 stitch, I am going to make 5. And I'm going to do that as follows. I'm going to put my needle in, and I'm going to knit 1, not pulling the stitch off of my left hand needle. I'm then going to bring my yarn to the front for that yarn over. Go back in, knit 1, bring the yarn front for a yarn over, and knit 1. You can see now that from that 1 stitch I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, which correspond to the knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1. Now turn the work. And those 5 stitches that we made, we're going to knit them all. Knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn again. And now those same 5 stitches we are going to purl. Purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to turn the work again, and we're going to start reducing those stitches back down to the single stitch that we started with. And we're going to do that over the next 2 rows that we knit on these stitches. And we're going to do that as follows. The first 2 stitches, we're going to knit them together. Oop. Knit 2 together, knit 1, and knit 2 together. So now I have only 3 stitches left. Turn, and I'm going to purl all 3 of those stitches together. So I need to insert my needle through all 3 of them. It's a little bit fiddly, but you can do it. Go through all 3, wrap the yarn, pull it back through to purl those 3 stitches together, and we have our bobble. We're back down to only a single stitch again. It doesn't look like much yet, but as we keep working, it will definitely become a nice little knot on the front of our work. The next instruction is to knit 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you go back and look at this little guy, you can already tell that it's becoming a little bobble on the front of your work. And that's only going to improve as we continue to go up a couple rows from that. And additionally, when we block, it'll help tighten everything up. All right, so now we're going to make another bobble, having knit those 8 stitches. Again, we go into that stitch, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and knit 1. Turn. Knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn. And purl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn. Knit 2 together. Knit 1. Knit 2 together. Turn. And purl 3 together. Then knit 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Make another bobble. Knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1. Turn. Knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn. Purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn. Knit 2 together, knit 1, and knit 2 together, turn, and go through all 3 stitches, purl 3 together. Knit 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now having made 3 bobbles, this 4th will be our last one in the row. So one more time. Knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1. Turn. Knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn. Purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn. Knit 2 together. Knit 1. Knit 2 together. Turn. And purl 3 together. Now at this point I'm going to stop and say, if at any point in that bobble you feel like you've made a mistake, you know, oh no, I purled when I should have knit, or maybe I didn't get enough stitches, or one of them dropped, or what have you. The good thing is at this point it's its own little insulated unit. You can take however many stitches you have just for the bobble. In this case I'm back down to 1, but no matter how many stitches you had, you could take them off just for the bobble, not the rest of your stitches, and just pull out until you got back down to that one original stitch before it was worked at all. It'll be pretty stretched out, so it shouldn't go anywhere if you have to pull your working yarn out of it. And put it back on your needle and just go after it again. Just remake it. It's its own little thing, so you don't have to worry about unraveling a whole row or anything like that. You can just pull out the bobble and start over on it. No biggie. So one more time. Purl 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Knit 2 together. Knit 1. Knit 2 together. Purl 3 together. And then for the last time that we do that, we end with knit 6 instead of knit 8. So you can see here are the 4 border stitches, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches remaining instead of 8. So we'll just work those 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then our seed stitch border. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're just going to go through and repeat that over and over again until you've worked those 12 rows a total of 5 times. So we're starting our second time with row 1, having made these bobbles. The only thing I would show you on the reverse side really quickly is that when you're working that stitch that you have made the bobble into, again, I'm going to work my 4 seed stitch. I'm going to purl those 6 stitches that I knit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, this is row number 2 that I'm working, a purl row. When I come to that stitch that I made the bobble into, I'm just gonna give it a little extra snugging up when I purl into that stitch. Just pull it a little bit tighter. And same thing for the next stitch. Just to kind of close up that gap that gets made from having put all that extra yarn into the other side. You can kind of see here how it creates a little bit of a divot. I just want to kind of make that stitch and the following one a little bit snug, just to kind of close that hole on the reverse side. And other than that, I'm just going to purl it all normally until I have my 5 repeats of these 12 rows. I will then work my top border, 5 rows of seed stitch, and when I turn the camera back on, I'll have a finished block.